I'm a big admirer of Lee Marvin. I think most people are. He's a most talented actor. He's currently starring along with Oliver Reed in Great Scout and Cat House Thursday. That's the name of the picture, folks. Would you welcome Lee Marvin?
I have a great deal of respect for Lee Marvin. I believe the majority of people are. He is a very good actor. Excellent Scout and Cat House Thursday are two of the films in which he is now appearing alongside Oliver Reed. To put it simply, that is the title of the pictures. Do you think Lee Marvin would be welcome? Lee Marvin was intoxicated when he arrived at the filming location in 1966, and he ended up destroying a prop gun. Following that, what transpired would end up costing a studio millions of dollars, would permanently shatter a friendship in the entertainment industry, and would cause his co-star to declare that he would rather battle a grizzly bear than work with Marvin again. This is the secret account of why Lee Marvin's co-star refused to work with him again. With drunken delays and revenge punches, this is the narrative that has never been told. The 19th of February, 1924 found Lee Marvin being born in the city of New York. The full name of the individual was Lamont Waltman Marvin Jr., and he did not have a simple childhood. Due to the fact that he had both ADHD and dyslexia, which nobody understood back then, he had a difficult time at school. The result was that he had a difficult and stressful time in school, and he frequently got into problems. At one point he was kicked out of school after shoving a fellow student off of a balcony on the second level. There were a number of schools that he attended, including a military academy and a residential school known as Manimet, but he never remained in any one place for an extended period of time. Despite the fact that he was not suited for school, Marvin cherished time spent outside. When he was a teenager, he would normally go hunting in the Everglades on the weekends. Among the species that he hunted were wild turkeys, pumas and deer. During his time spent in the wilderness, he gained the ability to survive in harsh environments, and developed a passion for adventure that remained with him for the rest of his life. Surprisingly, he also learned to play the violin when he was a small boy. This is something that you wouldn't expect from someone who would later become famous for playing rough guys. At the age of 18, Marvin enlisted in the United States military in 1942, the Marine Corps. However, Marvin did not pay attention to his father's advice and enlisted in the military. He swiftly completed his education in order to fulfill the prerequisites, and he then enrolled. In the beginning he was employed as a quartermaster. However, he quickly advanced his career and became a scout sniper in the 4th Marine Division. He participated in 21 engagements that took place on islands in the Pacific Ocean, some of which were notoriously bloody, such as the ones that took place on Kwajalein, Anywhere Tok, and Saipan. The most significant event that occurred during Marvin's service in the Marines was the Battle of Saipan, which took place in 1944. When the assault occurred, his battalion was in the process of climbing a mountain. In addition to being shot multiple times, Marvin had an injury that resulted in the amputation of a nerve in his back. All of the men who were a part of his unit were slain. Although Marvin was able to survive, he was hospitalized for more than a year in order to recover. Because of his gallantry, he was awarded a Purple Heart. His military career was cut short as a result of the injuries. Despite the fact that he had been recently raised to the rank of corporal, he was released from the military as a private first class. Due to his defiant nature, he was demoted from his position. Other medals, such as the Combat Action Ribbon and the Presidential Unit Citation, were bestowed upon him in addition to the Purple Heart. A young man, who was 22 years old at the time, found himself without a sense of purpose after being dismissed from the Marine Corps. Because he needed to make ends meet, he decided to take a job as an assistant to a plumber, earning only $27 per week. His life was irrevocably altered on a particular day in July, when he was working at the Maverick Theater to repair a toilet. Robert Elwin, the director of the theater, was having some difficulties. A performance of Roadside was scheduled to take place just a few hours before one actor became ill. Determined, he turned his gaze to Marvin, a young man with a tall stature and white hair, and inquired, "Have you ever been in a performance?" The response that Marvin provided was prompt and astute. "No, but I have been a liar throughout my entire life." In light of the fact that Elwin found that to be sufficient, he immediately offered him the post. Even though Marvin had no prior experience, he decided to play the role of Buzzy, a Texan who was known for his loudmouth. In spite of the fact that he had only 3 hours to get ready, he did not let it deter him. Later on, he stated that although I was not familiar with the difference between stage left and stage right, I was able to make a lot of noise. On that particular evening, all of a sudden something clicked in his mind. In addition to being a natural talent with a compelling presence, the audience adored him, and the local media referred to him as such. It was a hook for Marvin. The very following day, he resigned from his position as a plumber, and submitted a request for additional roles in the theater. Over the course of the subsequent few months, he participated in a number of plays, during which time he fell in love with acting, and began to cultivate the gruff no-nonsense attitude. In the future, he would become famous for that. Towards the beginning of 1947, Marvin was prepared to take things significantly. In order to attend the American Theater Wing, a school that is well known for producing actors such as Gregory Peck, he relocated to New York City and utilized the GI Bill to enroll in the program. In order to fully participate in the program, Marvin went to lessons on a daily basis, 6 days a week. In the beginning, acting was not an easy task. He battled with Shakespeare and dialects at the same time. His natural ability, however, stood out. His instructors recognized his potential, and remarked that his face could convey a narrative even in the absence of words. Additionally, Marvin became friends with peers, such as Jack Warden and Rod Steiger, both of whom would go on to become significant allies in his professional life. Marvin started looking for work after attending rigorous training for a period of 18 months. In the beginning, the roles were relatively minor, and he did not receive any recognition for them, but they provided him with invaluable experience. In his first picture, Leather Gloves, which was released in 1948, he portrayed a spectator at a boxing match who had no lines. Because he was so anxious, he was afraid that he could throw up. Over the course of the subsequent 2 years, he made appearances in films such as The Doolins of Oklahoma and 12 O'Clock High in supporting roles. Although these roles were only temporary, Marvin took use of them to get knowledge from more seasoned actors and to gain an understanding of the filmmaking process. In addition to that, he began working in television, obtained a 3-line job as a bartender in the studio where the actor was working. Every little thing he did helped him become more self-assured and allowed him to build relationships. When Marvin was finally given his first credited role, it was in the comedy You're in the Navy Now, which was released in 1951. He played the role of Quartermaster Krause, which was a relatively minor character, with only a few lines of dialogue, but it was a significant advancement. Gary Cooper was the star of the movie, and Marvin appeared in several of the same sequences as him, conveying messages such as "Sir, the starboard engine is overheating," among other things. The performance that Marvin gave was praised by the critics, who described it as credible and natural. It was a bizarre experience for Marvin to see his name appear in the credits for the very first time. The fact that his efforts were beginning to bear fruit was demonstrated by this. Both Charles Bronson and Jack Warden had their first appearances in the picture You're in the Navy, which is an interesting fact to consider, who would later collaborate with Marvin on one or more projects in the future. After some time had passed, Marvin made a remark about how the movie ought to have been called You're in the Movies Now. Lee Marvin's life was irrevocably altered when he was cast in the role of Vince Stone in the famous film noir The Big Heat, which was released in 1953. In the film, he played the role of Vince Stone, a ruthless gangster who was responsible for horrible acts. Lee devoted several weeks to researching real-life criminals in Chicago in order to get ready for the role. He saw how they moved, how they talked, and how they behaved. All of this effort was rewarded. Each and every second of his act was believed by the audience. Following the conclusion of the film, Lee's phone continued to ring. Due to the fact that directors admired his ability to bring villains to life, he received 17 proposals to play villains of a similar nature. In addition, The Big Heat was a huge success. Box office receipts totaling $2.3 million were earned. The rapidity with which Lee was becoming a star was demonstrated by the fact that his salary increased from $5,000 to $20,000 for his subsequent feature. After that, Lee featured alongside Marlon Brando in the film The Wild One, which was released in 1953. There was a lot of excitement about this film about motorcycle gangs, and Lee was the one who stole the show as Chino, the leader of a competing gang. There is a scenario that is well known in which Lee shattered a beer bottle on his own head. Not even in the script was that included. Right there and then, he made it up. The entire cast and crew was taken aback by it, but it ended up being one of the most memorable moments in the film. Because the movie made such a stir, it was not allowed to be released in the United Kingdom until 1967. On the other hand, it brought in $4.5 million in the United States. Because of his raw and unpredictable energy, Lee stood out from the crowd, even when compared to a big name like Brando. These films were the catalyst for Lee's career to take off. He had roles in a total of 12 films between the years 1954 and 1956, some of which included Bad Day at Black Rock and 7 Men from Now. As a result of his performances as characters that were more than just villains, he became Hollywood's favorite tough guy. They were difficult to understand and intense. By the year 1956, he was making $50,000 for each film. As time went on, Lee's notoriety continued to expand, and people began to view him as more than their typical villain. He was on the verge of becoming a true celebrity. Lee took a brave step into the world of television in the year 1957. His role in the crime drama M Squad, which was about a Chicago investigator named Frank Ballinger, was a starring one. Before its time, this show was already a hit. Real-life settings in Chicago were used for the filming, which contributed to the film's raw and genuine appearance. Additionally, the stories were courageous, highlighting themes that the majority of shows avoided, such as corruption in the police force. M Squad was a tremendously successful endeavor. Over the course of its 3 seasons, it continuously attracted millions of viewers each and every week. In the beginning, Lee was paid $5,000 for each episode, but by the end of the show's run, his pay had increased to $7,500. The theme song for the show, which was composed by Count Basie, even was successful enough to make it onto the music charts. M Squad was so well liked that it served as the basis for parodies such as The Police Squad and the Naked Gun feature films. Lee Marvin's life was irrevocably altered by the role he played in the 1965 film Cat Ballou. In the Western comedy, he played 2 characters that couldn't have been more different from one another. Kid Shalene was a drunk gunslinger, who was hopeless while he was sober but turned into a perfect shot after a few drinks. Marvin was a perfect shot after a few beers. In addition, he worked as Tim Strawn, a terrifying killer with a sweet-smelling nose. With his ability to strike a balance between fun and danger, Marvin shone his true genius. For the purpose of giving Kid Shalene a more authentic feel, Marvin spent time in bars observing how inebriated individuals behaved. When it came to Strawn, he utilized the knowledge he had gained while serving as a Marine during World War II, in order to create the character's icy and menacing aura. Both of these jobs stood out due to these particulars, in spite of the fact that the film was a comedy. Everyone, including Marvin himself, was taken aback when he was awarded the Academy Award in 1966. Notable individuals such as Richard Burton and Laurence Olivier were defeated by him. During the course of his speech, he made a joke about how much he owed to the horse that his character got to ride. Everyone's love for him increased as a result of that joke. Before the release of this film, Marvin was primarily a supporting character. The Wild One and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance are 2 examples of films in which he typically played the role of a villain or a tough guy. But Cat Ballou shown that he was capable of leading a film on his own. After he won the Academy Award, his salary skyrocketed, going from $60,000 to more than $1 million for his next major film. Within a short period of time, studios began lining up to cast him in important parts. In the year 1966, he played the lead role in the Western film The Professionals, which was about a perilous expedition to rescue a woman who had been kidnapped in Mexico. Alongside notable actors such as Burt Lancaster and Claudia Cardinelli, Marvin played the role of Rico Farden, a forceful and resourceful weapons expert. He has appeared on screen alongside other notable actors. Filming in the scorching Nevada desert was a challenging endeavor because temperatures reached well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit here. On the other hand, Marvin's commitment stood out. For the sake of a stunt, he even climbs up a steep cliff himself. The sharp and clever banter that he had with Lancaster really helped to make the movie more memorable. It was a hit with audiences, and it went on to become one of the most successful westerns of its day. As a result of Marvin's performance, he was nominated for a Golden Globe, and the film grossed more than $19.5 million, which was considered to be a significant achievement at the time. 1 year later, in 1967, Marvin had a starring role in the war film The Dirty Dozen, which went on to become one of the most successful films of the decade. During World War II, he portrayed the role of Major John Reisman, a harsh officer who was in charge of training a bunch of criminals for a mission that was exceptionally risky. The fact that Marvin had really served in the Marine Corps in the past gave his portrayal an air of authenticity and authority. Despite the fact that the film included an incredible ensemble, including Charles Bronson and Donald Sutherland, Marvin stood out as the most prominent character. He went so far as to perform dangerous feats, such as jumping out of a moving train. The movie was phenomenally successful, the achievement of $45 million, and the transformation of Marvin into one of the top-paid performers in Hollywood. The forceful personality of his role, and the unforgettable lines he delivered during the film became iconic, and the picture served as a model for many other war films that came after it. A different side of Marvin was revealed in the suspense film Point Blank, which was released later that same year. Walker was a man who was out for retribution after being deceived and left for dead, and he played the role of Walker. As for the film, the unconventional manner in which it told the story, together with its more profound concepts about vengeance and society, set it apart from everything else that was available at the time. Although Marvin did not speak much during the film, his strong presence ensured that his character would be remembered forever. Several real-world locales, including Los Angeles, and even Alcatraz Island, were used in the production of the film. Because Marvin insisted on performing his own stunts, his performance was even more amazing than it would have been otherwise. Despite the fact that it was not a huge success when it was first released, Point Blank went on to become a cult classic, and is today regarded as one of the most important crime films of the 1960s. Marvin took everyone by surprise when he was cast in the lead role of a musical called Paint Your Wagon in the year 1969. Ben Rumson, a cranky gold prospector who lived during the California gold rush, was the character that he played. Although no one anticipated that Marvin, who was known for playing challenging roles, would sing in a movie, he decided to take on the challenge. In order to get ready, he studied with a vocal coach, and his song Wonder Star ended up becoming an unexpected smash, climbing to the top of the charts in the United Kingdom for a period of 3 weeks. The movie was a commercial success despite the fact that it was made at a high cost, as it required the construction of a complete mining town for the purpose of the production. Although there was a lack of consensus among critics regarding Marvin's vocals, his performance brought a fresh and original element to his career, and demonstrated that he was not scared to experiment with new things. In 1969, after the release of Paint Your Wagon, Lee Marvin's career took a significant setback. He had comedic appearances in a number of films that failed to resonate with audiences. In the year 1970, one of them was a western called Monty Walsh, which was a film that made less money than it cost to produce. Prime Cut, a criminal thriller starring Gene Hackman, was released the next year in 1972. For the majority of people, it was too aggressive, and it did not perform well. Emperor of the North was a film that Marvin starred in back in 1973. Even while it brought him back together with the director of his Dirty Dozen film, it was not enough to make it a hit. The failures that Marvin experienced demonstrated how far his star had plummeted. With the release of The Big Red One in 1980, Marvin made a significant comeback. Fuller, who served in the military during World War II, was the director of this film, which was based on Fuller's own experiences during the war. As a harsh sergeant, Marvin played the role, an opportunity that was a fantastic fit for him. He applied his personal experience as a Marine to the character, which he brought to the role at the age of 56. When he was on set, he spent time instructing younger actors, such as Mark Hamill and Robert Carradine, on the relationships that exist between serving members of the military. The performance that Marvin gave was praised by the critics, who referred to it as one of the best of his career. Despite having a very low budget, the movie grossed $24 million internationally. It resulted in Marvin receiving his first nomination for a Golden Globe in 15 years. An actor who many people believed had reached the end of his career, made a successful reappearance. The Delta Force, which was released in 1986, was Marvin's final film. Alongside Chuck Norris, he played the role of a military leader in this action movie that was based on actual events that took place. Despite the fact that he was 62 years old and in terrible health at the time, Marvin continued to take the part seriously. Even some of his own stunts were performed by him. At the box office, the movie grossed a respectable amount of money, although it was not well received by reviewers. The opportunity to perform the tough guy parts that Marvin had become famous for was Marvin's last chance to do so. While this was going on, Lee Marvin's life was molded by his battle with alcohol, an issue that remained with him throughout his whole career. It became a component of both his public image and his profession as an actor, as he was renowned for his drinking, which became a part of his public image. During the production of Ship of Fools in 1965, it became increasingly difficult to overlook Marvin's drinking. During the moments that they were working on together, his co-star Vivien Leigh, who also struggled with alcohol, expressed her displeasure with the scent of his breath. On the other hand, Marvin's drinking did not always have a negative impact on his profession. Cat Ballou, for which he received an Academy Award, was the film in which he starred. The belief that his drinking in some way enhanced his performance was held by a significant number of individuals on the set, and this simply served to encourage him to continue drinking. However, his addiction came with a price paid. When Marvin was working on the set of The Big Red One in 1980, he would not communicate with his fellow actors for extended periods of time. And when he did, it was to insult them without any justification whatsoever. During the year 1983, when Marvin was working on the picture Gorky Park, his health had deteriorated, to the point where he needed to be admitted to the hospital as soon as he arrived on set. This was the only option available to the director Michael Apted, who was forced to hold rehearsals at Marvin's hospital bed. It was obvious by that point that his drinking was not only having a negative impact on his reputation, but it was also destroying his health. However, Marvin had a way of enchanting a few of the folks who were in his immediate vicinity. In spite of his wild antics, he was able to make friends with Vivien Leigh while they were both on Ship of Fools. It was a peculiar occurrence that he tore up an old deck of playing cards that was located at Leigh's own residence. However, she did not appear to be upset. On the contrary, she appeared to have a deeper affection for him, which demonstrates how potentially problematic Marvin's relationships may be. However, not everyone was as lenient as others. Marvin did not find any acting work for a whole year after the conclusion of his television series, M Squad, which aired in 1960. He became despondent as a result of this, which most likely had a significant role in the developing reputation he gained as an untrustworthy individual due to his drinking. During his time on The Professionals, Marvin experienced one of the most difficult periods of his career. The relationship between Lee Marvin and Burt Lancaster became tense upon the beginning of filming for The Professionals in the year 1966. On a day in the Mojave Desert that was so scorching hot that temperatures reached 110 degrees Fahrenheit, the situation started to truly get out of hand. Marvin, a combat veteran who was extremely concerned with historical accuracy, expresses his desire for the movie to employ firearms that are accurate to the era. This was not Lancaster's opinion. He believed that the appearance of the firearms was more important than the fact that they were genuine. An argument that began as a disagreement eventually escalated into a full-blown conflict. When Marvin became so enraged, he tossed a fake gun to the ground, and it came dangerously close to hitting someone. After becoming enraged, Lancaster confronted the individual. In the end, the two were pushing each other until the crew had to intervene and break up the fight. Filming came to a halt for several hours, causing the studio to lose a significant amount of money. After some time had passed, the director, Richard Brooks, took both actors away for a very serious conversation. During the next day, Marvin made a public display of contrition by lowering himself to his knees in front of Lancaster. Things were made even more difficult by the fact that it turned out to be a joke. There was no improvement in the ill will that existed between Marvin and Lancaster. The tension was so intense that it was impossible to ignore for the remainder of the shoot.
The lines that Marvin would say in scenes with Lancaster would be intentionally messed up, which would result in retakes and waste of time. In a particular instance, Lancaster, who is well known for performing his own stunts, was getting ready to climb across a moving train in order to perform a potentially hazardous scenario. Marvin made the decision to participate in the stunt as well, despite the fact that he was on a hangover from the previous night. The result of this was yet another argument, during which Lancaster accused Marvin of acting in a hazardous manner. There was yet another delay in the filming, which resulted in an increase in the overall expenditure. On October 5th, things reached their lowest point in history. When Marvin arrived late to a crucial moment, he smelled like booze, and had a hard time remembering his lines during the performance. The heat caused Lancaster to lose his cool, despite the fact that he was already dressed. Marvin was the target of his yelling in front of everyone, during which he referred to him as a disgrace, and threatened to leave the film. The level of intensity of the ranting was so high, that a young member of the team began to cry. The entire day's agenda was thrown into disarray as a result of Lancaster's irrational decision to storm off to his trailer and refuse to come out for many hours. The studio explored the possibility of replacing Marvin, but ultimately felt that doing so would result in more complications than it would resolve. Richard Brooks, the director, found himself in the thick of everything that was going on. It was a concern of his that things would become physical. Not all of his worries were unwarranted. It was intended for Lancaster's punch to be a fake, but it actually impacted Marvin during one of the fight scenes, causing him to receive a bruise. Lancaster stated that it was an accident. Nonetheless, there were speculations circulating that it could have been a form of retaliation for Marvin's behavior. Due to the fact that the situation became so stressful, Brooks decided to implement additional safety precautions for the mountain sequence that would serve as the climax of the film. These precautions included separate rehearsals and more stunt doubles. Immediately following the conclusion of the shoot, Marvin and Lancaster did not collaborate again. It was their feud that brought them fame in Hollywood. When asked if he would ever work with Marvin again, Lancaster responded, "I'd rather wrestle a grizzly bear." This exchange took place many years later. In front of others, Marvin displayed a more conciliatory demeanor, yet he confided in his pals that dealing with Lancaster was comparable to using a statue that had a negative attitude. Their disagreement not only resulted in the termination of their working partnership, but it also most likely forced them to forego other chances. It became a cautionary tale about how personal grudges can eclipse even the most famous actors and actresses when the turmoil that occurred on the set of The Professionals went viral. A lot of ups and downs occurred in Lee Marvin's personal life, just like they did in the lives of the characters he portrayed in movies. Twice he tied the knot. His first marriage, which took place in 1951, was to Betty Ebeling. Together they were blessed with 4 children: Christopher, Courtney, Cynthia and Claudia. During the 16 years that they were together, Betty endured a great deal. Marvin was a person who frequently got into trouble with the authorities, drank excessively, and cheated. Later on, Betty said in her memoir that Marvin would get pulled over for driving under the influence of alcohol, but he would typically charm his way out of the situation by offering autographs to the authorities. The couple divorced in 1967, not long after Marvin was awarded an Academy Award for his performance in Cat Ballou. It came as a surprise to everyone when Marvin left his children only $10,000, despite the fact that he was famous and wealthy. During his death in 1987, despite the fact that he was worth millions of dollars, Pamela Feely, his childhood sweetheart, was the subject of his second marriage, which was more peaceful. In the aftermath of Marvin's difficult separation with Michelle Triola, they reconnected, and Pamela remained by his side for the next 17 years, till the time of his passing. However, the chapter of Marvin's life that became the most talked about was the one in which he was in a relationship with Michelle Triola. They shared a bedroom for a period of 5 years. In addition, Michelle changed her surname to Marvin, despite the fact that they were not married. Following their breakup, she initiated a well-known legal action, requesting a sum of $1.8 million, arguing that she was entitled to 50% of the earnings that Marvin had made during their time together. The legal dispute known as Marvin versus Marvin carried on for years, and eventually became a contentious topic of discussion.